The morning my son called to say he needed help, I was standing at the kitchen window watching a cardinal land on the feeder I'd built last spring. I remember thinking how strange it was, that bird showing up at exactly that moment. Like the universe wanted me to notice something beautiful before the ugliness started again. I set down my coffee mug. The ceramic clicked against the granite countertop. I'd installed that countertop myself, same as I'd installed most everything else in this house. The hardwood floors, the crown molding, the back deck where I drink my coffee every morning when the weather allows. 63 years old and these hands still know how to build things. My son never learned that. I tried to teach him. He wasn't interested. Dad. His voice had that quality I hadn't heard in almost 3 years. Careful. Measured. The voice of someone who wants something and is trying to figure out the angle. It's been a while. It had been 2 years and 9 months, to be precise. I know because the last time I heard his voice, he was standing in the driveway of the house I owned. The house his mother and I had bought in 1987. The house where I'd raised him, where I'd painted his bedroom 3 times as he changed his mind about what kind of person he wanted to be. And he was telling me I needed to leave. He was 34. I was 60. My wife had passed 14 months earlier from a cancer that moved faster than any of us expected. I was still learning how to sleep on my side of the bed without reaching across for her. The arrangement isn't working, he said. He was standing next to his wife. They'd gotten married the previous spring, a wedding I'd paid for in full. $38,000, which I considered an investment in his future. His wife had her arms crossed. She'd never looked at me the way a daughter-in-law should look at a father. What arrangement? I asked. You living here. It's our house now, Dad. I want to be very careful here because I've thought about this moment every day since it happened. I need you to understand something. It was not their house. My wife and I had never transferred the deed. We talked about it. The way you talk about things you'll get to eventually. The way you assume there's more time. After she passed, I hadn't updated anything. I was grieving. I was barely functional. I was eating cereal for dinner and forgetting to check the mail. But my son had done his homework. He pulled out a document. I remember the sound it made. Paper unfolding, crisp and official. He'd had an attorney look at something. I didn't understand it all in that moment, standing in my own driveway, the neighbor's dog barking 2 houses over. What I understood was this. He'd found a way to make a legal argument that felt, at minimum, complicated. And I was 60 years old and hadn't slept properly in 14 months, and I had no fight in me. He handed me an envelope. Inside was $300 in cash and a note that said, "For your transition, $300. For the house I'd owned for 33 years. I took the envelope. I don't know why. Shock, maybe. Or maybe some part of me believed he'd come to his senses in the morning. I drove to a Motel 6 on Route 9 and sat on the edge of a mattress that smelled like industrial cleaner. And I called my younger brother who lives in Tucson, and I said, "Something has happened." And I couldn't say anything else for about 4 minutes. My brother wanted me to fight it immediately. Hire an attorney, file an injunction, show up on Monday morning. He was furious in the way that brothers get furious on your behalf, cleaner than your own anger, no complicated grief mixed in. But I didn't do that, not right away. There's something that happens to a man when his own child discards him. Something quiet and devastating that doesn't have a clean name. It's not just grief, and it's not just rage. It's closer to a recalibration. Like everything you believed about who you were in the world turns out to have been based on a foundation you never thought to check. I spent 2 weeks in that motel. I called my oldest friend, a man named Archie, who I've known since we were stationed together at Fort Campbell in 1983. Archie didn't say much. He just said, "Come to Knoxville. Sleep in my guest room. Get your bearings." So I drove 7 hours south and I slept in Archie's guest room and I started to think. I had skills. I'd worked in residential construction for 30 years before I'd moved into project management, and before retirement, I'd spent 8 years overseeing developments for a mid-size builder out of Columbus. I knew how houses went together. I knew subcontractors, suppliers, inspectors, timelines. I knew what things actually cost versus what people thought they cost. I also had money my son didn't know about. This is important and I want to be honest about it. Over the years, my wife and I had maintained a separate account. Not hidden, exactly, but private. An account we'd started in 1998 after a rough patch. Money that we'd agreed was our cushion, our never-touch-it fund. After she passed, it sat. I hadn't touched it. In my fog of grief, I'd nearly forgotten it existed. The balance was $61,000. I withdrew $45,000 and called a man I'd worked with 20 years earlier. A developer named Whitfield, 68 years old, sharp as he'd ever been, who'd retired to Western Tennessee and spent his days flipping distressed properties. He remembered me. He said he had a 4-unit rental property in Clarksville that needed serious work and a partner willing to do some of the labor. I moved to Clarksville. I want to be clear about what the next 18 months looked like, because the people in the comments always ask, and because I think it matters. It was not glamorous. I was 60 years old, gutting bathrooms. I was driving to Home Depot at 6 in the morning and crawling under houses to check plumbing. I ate a lot of sandwiches. I lost 17 pounds. My knees complained every single day. But Whitfield knew what he was doing, and I knew what I was doing, and between the two of us, we turned that property around in 5 months. We sold it for $240,000. My share, after costs, was $78,000. We did it again with a duplex in Murfreesboro, then a small commercial property outside Nashville that we converted to mixed-use residential. Whitfield had the network. I had the hands and the eye and the willingness to work. By the time 18 months had passed, I had cleared, after taxes, just over $400,000. I bought a house in Brentwood. 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, a back porch that faces a tree line, a kitchen with the kind of light my wife always wanted. I paid cash. I paid cash because I was 62 years old, and I did not intend to owe anyone anything ever again. I hadn't spoken to my son. He'd called twice in the first 6 months, once around the holidays, once in spring. I let both calls go to voicemail. His messages were brief and careful, the kind of messages a person leaves when they want to maintain the option of reconciliation without actually apologizing for anything. "Hey, Dad, just checking in. Hope you're doing all right. Give me a call when you get a chance." I did not call back. My attorney, a woman I hired in Nashville who specialized in estate law, had spent those months quietly doing what I should have done 2 years earlier. She found that the document my son had produced in the driveway that night was not as airtight as he'd believed. There had been a joint tenancy provision I'd overlooked. The property transfer he'd attempted had procedural problems. She was building a case slowly, carefully. I told her not to rush it. I wanted to be standing on solid ground before anything happened. I wanted my son to see the ground he was standing on before the floor came out from under it. That call came on a Tuesday morning in October. I was on the back porch with my coffee. The tree line was doing that thing it does in Tennessee in the fall, every color at once like the mountain can't decide how to feel. My phone lit up with a number I recognized. I let it ring 4 times. Then I answered. "Dad." Same voice, same careful register. "It's been a while." "It has," I said. There was a pause. I could hear him breathing. I'd learned in those 2 years and 9 months that silence is its own kind of leverage. I didn't feel it. "I wanted to reach out," he said. There's been some changes. He paused. We're going through some things. I knew from sources I'd rather not detail that his wife had filed for divorce 4 months earlier. I knew that the house, my house, had been assessed at a value that made the ongoing legal questions about its ownership considerably more complicated. I knew that my son, who had worked in pharmaceutical sales, had been let go from his position during a company restructuring. I'm sorry to hear that, I said. And I meant it in the way you mean something that you also believe was inevitable. Dad, I've been thinking about everything. I think we need to talk. We're talking now. Another pause. In person. I think I'd like to come see you. I've been going through a lot and I think family should. Where would you stay? I asked. The question landed like I intended it to. He stumbled. I don't know, I figured. There are some good hotels in the area, I said. I can send you some names. Silence. Longer this time. Dad, are you serious? I'm always serious, I said. Were you serious when you handed me $300 and told me to transition out of my own house? He didn't answer that. I'm not angry, I told him. And that was the truest thing I said in that entire conversation. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger had been the first layer, the one that burned hot in the Motel 6 and smoldered through those early weeks in Knoxville. What was underneath the anger once it burned down was something quieter. Clarity, maybe. Or just the understanding of who people actually are once they've shown you. I made a mistake, he said. I know that. You made several, I said. But the one that matters most isn't what you did to me. It's what you chose to be. I heard him inhale. Something was shifting on his end. Some performance he'd prepared was starting to crack. Dad, I don't have anywhere to go. I'm serious. The house. He stopped. There are some legal complications with the house. I know, I said. A beat. What do you mean, you know? I mean that my attorney has been in contact with the court regarding the original transfer. I mean that the property records have some interesting questions attached to them at this point. I mean that I know a great deal about the current status of that situation. The silence that followed was a different kind of silence, not the comfortable kind, the kind that has weight. You've had an attorney this whole time, he said. It wasn't a question. I had an attorney within 30 days of leaving, I said. I had 2 years and 9 months to let her work. What came next was not what I'd expected. He cried, real crying. Not performance. I've known this person since before he could walk. I know what his real crying sounds like. And I sat with it on my back porch, watching the trees. I let him cry. I didn't hang up, and I didn't say everything was fine. When he stopped, I said, I want you to understand something. I'm not trying to destroy you. I don't want you to lose everything. But you need to understand that what you did had consequences, and those consequences are real. And I spent 2 years living inside them, and you don't get to walk back in and pretend the ground hasn't shifted. What do I do? He asked. Get an attorney, I said. A good one. Not the person who wrote that document you showed me in the driveway because that person made errors. Get someone qualified and have a real conversation about what the situation is. And us, he said. What about us? I thought about that. About the cardinal and the feeder that morning. About my wife, who loved him more than he deserved and more than he knew. About what she would say if she were here. And I knew what she'd say. Because she'd say he's still your son, Earl. And that means something. That's a longer conversation, I said, and it'll have to wait until the legal side is resolved. I won't have a father and son conversation while attorneys are involved. Once this is settled, once everyone knows where they stand, then we talk. Okay, he said, quietly. Okay, I said. The legal resolution took another 4 months. My attorney was thorough. What emerged after mediation was this. The attempted transfer had been procedurally flawed in two significant ways. I recovered ownership of the property, in lieu of a full civil proceeding that could have exposed him to additional liability for the fraudulent elements of the transaction. He agreed to a structured repayment of costs and damages, a figure that, spread over several years, would be a significant weight on a man who'd just lost his job and his marriage. I did not feel triumphant when the papers were signed. I want to be honest about that. I felt tired and relieved and sad, in the way you're sad when something you hoped would never have to be true turns out to be true. I sold the original house. I couldn't live there again. Too many layers of meaning, and not all of them good. The sale proceeds went into a trust that my attorney set up, and I won't say more about that, except that my wife's memory is honored in it. My son and I have spoken 3 times since the settlement. The conversations are short. They are not warm, but they are not cold either. They exist in a kind of held space, something like a truce that neither of us has fully signed yet. He is living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Cincinnati. He is working again. Different company, same industry. He has not asked to come visit. I have not invited him. I'm sitting on my back porch as I write this. The tree line is bare now. Winter came fast this year. The cardinal hasn't been back since October, but I keep the feeder stocked. Some things you do on faith. 63 years old, and I am starting over in the best house I've ever lived in a state I chose for myself, on a morning that belongs entirely to me. Someone asked me once what I'd say to him if I could go back to that driveway, if I could speak to the version of myself standing there holding that envelope, $300 for 33 years. I'd say, keep the envelope. You're going to need to remember exactly how much they thought you were worth, and then go build something they can't take back. The coffee's gone cold. The trees are still. Somewhere down the road, a school bus is making its rounds. It's a good morning. There's a line I keep coming back to, something I didn't understand until I was sitting in that Motel 6 on Route 9 with $300 in an envelope on the nightstand. The line is simple. What people do to you when they believe you have nothing left to offer is the truest thing they will ever tell you about themselves. My son told me exactly who he was that night in the driveway. I just wasn't ready to hear it. I've thought about the sequence of events many times since then, not with bitterness, but the way you study a map after you've already made the wrong turn, trying to understand where the road actually went. What I see now is that nothing happened without cause. He had watched for years as I gave freely. The wedding, the house, the patience, the silence when I should have spoken. He had learned, slowly, that there were no real consequences to taking. That's not entirely his fault. Some of it was how I raised him. Some of it was what I allowed. But here's what I also know. The moment he handed me that envelope, something shifted in me that I didn't expect. Not defeat, something closer to freedom. Because when you've lost the thing you were most afraid of losing, the fear goes with it. And what's left, if you're willing to stay upright and keep moving, is just you, stripped down. 60 years old and starting from scratch and, as it turns out, still capable of more than anyone gave you credit for. What carried me through wasn't luck. It was the work ethic my own father drilled into me before I was old enough to resent it. Get up, show up, do it right. It was 30 years of knowledge I'd accumulated in my hands and my head. Knowledge my son had never bothered to learn because he'd assumed I'd always be there to carry the weight. It was Whitfield who looked at a 60-year-old man with dirty boots and a clear eye and said, "I know what you can do." And it was the choice, made quietly, alone, in a guest room in Knoxville, to think before I acted, to be patient, to let truth do its work instead of rage, That's the part people don't talk about enough. Patience isn't passivity. It's the decision to be smart instead of just loud. My attorney was thorough because I gave her time. The legal case held because I didn't blow it apart with emotion. The properties turned because I thought carefully and worked hard and trusted the right person. Every piece of the outcome traced back to a decision I'd made calmly, without an audience. My son is rebuilding his life right now in a one-bedroom in Cincinnati. I don't wish him harm. I genuinely don't. But I also don't carry his consequences for him anymore. That's not coldness. That's the clearest, most honest form of respect I know how to offer. He is a grown man. He made choices. The world responded accordingly. And I'm sitting on a back porch that I own free and clear, in a state I chose for myself, watching a tree line go bare for winter. My wife used to say that the truth always finds its level, like water. She was right about most things. I think about her every day. I think about what she'd make of all of it. The envelope, the motel, Clarksville, the phone call in October, the papers signed. I think she'd say I took too long to stand up for myself, and she'd be right about that too. But I'm standing now. The feeder's full, the coffee's hot. The morning belongs to no one but me.